For over a century, gasoline motorcycles ruled the road loud, hot, and mechanically complicated in a way that kept dealerships and service bays profitable year after year. Then Honda rolled out a new electric concept that doesn't just go EV. It changes the architecture of the motorcycle so completely that the old rules stop applying. No engine block dictating the frame, no heat routing deciding the shape. Weight placed where control begins, not where tradition demands. This isn't about one cool bike. It's about what happens when a motorcycle stops needing the maintenance cycle the entire industry depends on. Fewer moving parts, fewer routine failures, fewer service visits. And suddenly, the business model behind modern motorcycling starts to crack. But that shift didn't happen overnight. Honda has been building toward this moment for years. And once you see what this design makes possible, you'll understand why riding is about to change forever, and who stands to lose the most when it does. The new architecture. Honda's striking EV outlier does not whisper change. It announces it. From the moment the cover lifted, riders realized this was not another electric placeholder meant to fill a catalog. This machine exists to show how far the industry can move when a company decides to break every inherited rule at once. The outlier does not start with an engine and build a bike around it. It begins with freedom and builds the future around that instead. The core of the EV outlier is a straight spine-line frame, a single clean structure that replaces the bulky latticework required for combustion engines. With no cylinders, no radiators, and no fuel mass to balance, Honda frees the chassis from 100 years of limitations. The battery sits low beneath that spine, locking weight exactly where control begins. For the first time in decades, a motorcycle's shape is not dictated by heat, vibration, or exhaust routing. The form exists because the engineers wanted it, not because the engine demanded it. This is why the outlier matters. It is the first major manufacturer concept that stops trying to mimic combustion layouts and instead asks what an electric motorcycle could be if nothing stood in the way. The architecture feels inevitable once you see it, as if every modern electric bike has been waiting for this one to make the first move. But new packaging alone was not the real shock, and Honda knew the next step had to push even harder. And once the structure changed, the riding position followed. Radical proportions and rider position. The EV outlier overturns the idea of what a motorcycle must look like the moment you see how low the seat sits. It rides almost at cruiser height, yet the posture is not cruiser at all. The stance stretches long and calm, with the rider positioned deeper inside the machine than on top of it. This layout is impossible on traditional bikes because the engine always forces the seat upward. Remove the engine, and the design rules collapse. Honda used that collapse to reshape balance itself. The feet-forward posture gives the outlier a silhouette that feels futuristic, without drifting into gimmick territory. It looks intentional, engineered, and confident. The proportions challenge everything riders assume a performance-capable electric motorcycle should resemble. When there is no engine block demanding room, the seat drops, the chassis spreads, and the rider becomes part of the center mass instead of perched above it. Long-distance comfort, stability, and low-speed control all benefit from this approach, even before the wheels start turning. This is where Honda shows its hand. The outlier is not designed to impress with loud shapes or exaggerated curves. It is built to demonstrate what can happen when the most important component of a motorcycle, the rider, becomes the anchor around which the machine is built. The proportions hint at a category that does not yet exist, one where electric freedom defines ergonomics rather than legacy constraints. And once the posture changed, the aerodynamics followed because every inch of the new stance created fresh airflow challenges that Honda turned into opportunities. And those opportunities produced one of the most unusual aero systems ever fitted to a motorcycle. If you're finding this breakdown useful, give the video a like and hit subscribe so you never miss the updates shaping the next decade of riding. And share your thoughts below, because your experience helps guide where this conversation goes next. Transparent aerodynamics system. Honda's EV Outlier introduces a transparent aerodynamic system that immediately separates it from every electric motorcycle built so far. The front fairing is clear, not for styling, but for performance. It moves with the suspension, hugging the wheel and closing the gap that normally creates drag. Traditional motorcycles leave that space open because engines, forks, and geometry prevent tighter integration. The Outlier eliminates those barriers and uses its freedom to improve efficiency with a system that looks almost impossible. The moving aero panel directs air around the wheel with precision, reducing turbulence that typically robs electric motorcycles of range. The belly pan follows the same logic. Its transparency lets viewers see the structure while allowing engineers to shape airflow without the visual weight of traditional plastics. This is aerodynamic function, disguised as futuristic art. Nothing about it is decorative. Everything is serving the mission of extending range and sharpening stability. Electric platforms gain more from drag reduction than combustion bikes because every watt saved becomes distance earned. Honda understands this and uses the Outlier to show how EV-specific aerodynamics should evolve when freed from combustion-era packaging. The transparent system is a statement. Electric motorcycles do not have to chase the past to perform in the future. But the real engineering gamble was not in the bodywork or the airflow. It was hiding inside the wheels themselves, waiting to rewrite another rule that once seemed untouchable. And those wheels reveal Honda's boldest decision yet. While we cut through what's next, keep your ride dialed. Solid, road-tested gears and accessories are waiting in the description. Two-wheel drive mechanics. Honda's EV Outlier strips away the traditional drivetrain entirely and replaces it with independent hub motors in both wheels. No chain, no belt, no shaft, no gear reduction system stealing power through friction. Each wheel generates its own thrust, letting the motorcycle think about traction in ways combustion platforms cannot. This is not a performance gimmick. It is a structural redefinition of what a motorcycle can be when its propulsion becomes modular instead of centralized. The rear hub motor delivers direct power without mechanical loss. The front hub motor adds possibilities never available on traditional bikes. Traction becomes adjustable, acceleration becomes balanced, stability becomes programmable instead of purely mechanical. Removing the driveline frees mass, cleans the chassis, and unlocks new levels of weight distribution control. This approach also simplifies everything that used to require constant attention. No chain stretch, no sprocket wear, no belt tensioning. The motorcycle becomes a cleaner, tighter machine focused on riding rather than maintaining mechanical linkages. The concept proves that two-wheel drive is not a novelty, but a natural evolution once electric motors escaped the confines of the frame. And Honda did not build this strange, forward-looking machine without a larger plan. The Outlier is more than a concept. It is a declaration of direction. Why Honda needed a concept? This bold, Honda entered the electric space cautiously with the WN7, a machine that followed familiar shapes and avoided dramatic engineering leaps. That conservative choice helped the company prove reliability, but it also exposed a strategic gap. Riders and analysts could see Honda was participating in electrification, yet its identity inside the new landscape remained undefined. The firm needed something that signaled innovation rather than adaptation, and the EV Outlier became that vehicle. It was built to test boundaries, not to satisfy immediate commercial demand. Instead of refining existing templates, the concept broke them, demonstrating that Honda intended to lead rather than simply follow market pressure. The Outlier provides a sandbox where design, packaging, and control systems can be explored without the weight of production deadlines. By treating it as a pure research platform, Honda creates space to question assumptions carried over from combustion machines. It gives their engineers permission to try ideas that would be too risky for a launch model. The outlier's role is to shift perception from incremental steps to deliberate reinvention. It signals that Honda wants to craft an electric identity shaped by engineering opportunity rather than heritage constraints. Its presence reframes expectations for Honda's future electric lineup. And the battery tech inside hints at an even larger shift. That shift marks the beginning of a broader rethink of how Honda defines innovation across its entire electric development timeline. And the battery tech inside hints at an even larger shift: the solid-state battery roadmap. Honda's long-term electric strategy depends on transforming energy storage, not merely reshaping motorcycle frames. Solid-state technology sits at the center of that plan. Industry research shows that solid-state cells can carry more energy per kilogram, maintain stability under heavy load, and reduce heat generation during sustained output. Honda's internal roadmap points toward commercial solid-state packs entering motorcycle applications in the early 2030s, where improved density and lower weight will make electrification viable for sport and touring platforms. The EV Outlier's compact battery form hints that Honda is already modeling its future chemistry around these targets. The pack appears intentionally small because the concept represents the architecture, not the final endurance numbers. Solid-state ambitions also change packaging priorities inside the chassis. If weight and volume drop significantly, engineers can shape bikes around balance and mass centralization instead of fighting bulk. Honda's research divisions have published statements describing their goal of integrating battery structure into the frame itself, reducing redundant material and improving rigidity. The Outlier's underspine placement previews that direction, suggesting a world where batteries support the motorcycle rather than simply ride within it. This roadmap sets the tone for Honda's next decade of electrification, where chemistry and structure converge. Those control systems redefine how future chassis will respond under load. But energy is only half the story. Control is the other. That shift begins with foundational research commitments. But energy is only half the story. Control is the other. Independent wheel control logic. The EV Outlier allows Honda to investigate how torque should be managed when each wheel carries its own motor. Traditional motorcycles rely on mechanical symmetry and predictable driveline behavior controlled from the rear. Electric hub systems break that pattern, opening research pathways into torque vectoring, stability logic, and adaptive traction response. Honda uses internal simulations to study how subtle power adjustments between front and rear wheels could influence corner entry, mid-turn balance, and straight-line acceleration. Instead of reacting to traction loss, control software can anticipate conditions by reading sensor patterns and applying micro-level corrections. This work is foundational rather than commercial. Honda is not promising production torque vectoring, but it is building a library of behavior models to shape future platforms. The EV architecture gives engineers full freedom to treat drive forces as programmable variables instead of fixed mechanical outputs. This shifts motorcycle handling from a purely physical domain into a blended mechanical-digital one. It also lets Honda explore how hub motors might cooperate with braking systems, regenerative strategies, and suspension sensors to form a coherent control package. Such logic may begin in concepts, but its influence will grow as electrification expands across Honda's catalog. And as Honda changes how a bike behaves, they will also change how a bike gets built. That shift will guide software development for many upcoming electric prototypes. These insights anchor Honda's future dynamic control strategy, and as Honda changes behavior, they will also change how a bike gets built. Manufacturing philosophy shift. Electrification forces manufacturers to rethink how motorcycles are assembled, and Honda is using the EV Outlier to map that future. Hub motor architecture removes chains, sprockets, belts, tensioners, and related housing. Each missing component means fewer parts to produce, inspect, and inventory. Factories gain efficiency because assembly lines can shorten. Quality checks become simpler, and failure points shrink. The Outlier demonstrates how a motorcycle could be built with dramatically fewer moving parts, improving reliability while lowering lifetime maintenance demands. These advantages matter for manufacturing planning, where every saved component reduces cost and complexity. Honda's engineers also view electrification as a chance to redesign sub-assembly logic. If batteries, controllers, and motors can be standardized across several models, factories can shift from bespoke platforms to modular production clusters. The Outlier's clean frame and integrated systems preview that approach. Structural clarity simplifies robotic assembly, reduces welding demands, and shortens calibration time. Weight distribution improvements from hub motors also ease fixture design by removing the offsets caused by combustion engines. This philosophy points toward factories that resemble automotive EV lines more than traditional motorcycle plants, with higher automation and tighter integration between software and hardware. Honda sees electrification as a doorway to manufacturing consistency, not complication. But the factory is not where the real shockwaves hit first. Those shockwaves begin where technology meets long-term strategic intent. That intent guides Honda's evolution towards scalable electric production systems. Forward. But the factory is not where the real shockwaves hit first. The shock to riding identity. Honda's EV Outlier stepped into the public eye with a shape that ignored every established cue riders normally associate with a motorcycle. The low seat, the stretched stance, and the transparent bodywork challenged the familiar silhouette that has carried riding culture for more than 100 years. Reactions ranged from curiosity to confusion because the machine refused to align with tradition. Many riders described it as a break from the visual rhythm that defines street credibility. Others saw opportunity in the unfamiliar form, noting that electric propulsion allows designers to rethink what a motorcycle is supposed to look like, rather than what it used to be. This tension between tradition and experimentation exposed a deeper divide. Some riders believed the Outlier represented a departure from the soul of motorcycling, replacing recognizable proportions with something that felt unanchored from history. Others welcomed the disruption, arguing that clinging to combustion-era shapes limits innovation. The Outlier disrupted expectations by showing that a future motorcycle does not need to mimic the past. Instead, it can follow a direction shaped by efficiency, balance, and new mobility demands. This cultural split became a conversation about identity. Riders were forced to consider whether the essence of motorcycling comes from the engine layout or from the freedom of design that follows a new power source. The Outlier did not answer that question, but it ensured the debate will continue. And that tension did not stay on the street. It forced other brands to move. And once riders reacted, the ripple hit Honda's rivals. Competitor reactions across the industry. The unveiling of the EV Outlier caused the major manufacturers to reassess their own electric strategies. Yamaha, already experimenting with electric sports concepts, viewed Honda's bold leap as validation that non-traditional forms could gain mainstream attention. The company's internal teams accelerated design studies that explored unconventional packaging and new digital interfaces. Yamaha saw the Outlier as an indicator that innovation would not be judged solely on range or speed, but also on how a bike redefines its presence. Harley-Davidson reacted more cautiously. The company's electric ambitions had slowed after the Livewire shift, and the Outlier highlighted the contrast between Harley's measured strategy and Honda's willingness to take risks. Harley's hesitation centered on the challenge of aligning a radical electric form with a brand built on heritage. The Outlier put pressure on Harley to project a clearer direction, even if only conceptually. European manufacturers observed the development with analytical interest. Brands like BMW and KTM evaluated how Honda's choices might influence their long-term electrification timelines. While not rushing to imitate, They recognized that the outlier hinted at new expectations for aerodynamic solutions, packaging discipline, and experimental silhouettes. The machine demonstrated that electric motorcycles could adopt visual language free from combustion constraints. But the real pressure landed somewhere else, entirely inside dealerships, and once competitors adjusted, the spotlight fell on the shop floors. If you want to stay ahead of the changes rolling through the motorcycle world, make sure you subscribe. Impact on dealers and service departments. Electric motorcycles present a structural challenge to the traditional dealership model. Reduced maintenance means fewer service visits, and fewer service visits mean lower long-term revenue for shops that rely heavily on parts and labor. The EV outlier, even as a concept, reminded dealerships that the electric transition threatens a business foundation built on oil changes, valve checks, and drivetrain repairs. The streamlined systems of electric platforms shrink the list of recurring services that keep workshops profitable. Dealers also face uncertainty when evaluating how to allocate floor space and resources. Training technicians for electric diagnostics requires investment, yet the demand remains unpredictable. The outlier prompted questions about how quickly customers will adopt electric motorcycles, and whether parts availability, battery policies, and manufacturer support will stabilize. Shops must plan for a future where fewer mechanical components circulate through their service bays, forcing a shift towards software diagnostics and battery-related procedures. This transition creates tension because the current sales ecosystem depends on the volume of maintenance cycles. If electrification expands, dealers may need new revenue structures that reflect reduced wear and simplified drivetrains. The outlier symbolized the incoming transformation by presenting a machine with minimal moving parts. And even if the shops adapt, the riding experience itself is the next frontier. And when the business side adjusts, the sensation of riding becomes the next point of change. The new riding experience. Electric platforms enable a level of dynamic control that combustion motorcycles cannot replicate. The EV outlier hints at a future where stability logic shapes the feel of the ride in real time. Instead of relying solely on rider input and mechanical response, the machine can analyze conditions and assist in maintaining balance, traction, and direction. This does not replace skill, but it augments the ride with subtle corrective decisions that operate beneath awareness. Comfort tuning also stands to evolve. With power delivery controlled digitally, the machine can interpret terrain, adjust behavior, and soften response to reduce fatigue. Predictive ride adjustments may adapt between smooth pavement, uneven surfaces, or sudden changes in weather. The outlier's platform serves as a testbed for these possibilities, where the ride becomes less about overcoming mechanical limitations and more about refining the interaction between rider and environment. This evolution does not alter the core mechanics, but modifies how a motorcycle communicates with its operator. Experience becomes a blend of stability, assistance, comfort calibration, and smooth electric response. The outlier shows that an electric motorcycle can provide a new type of engagement shaped by technology rather than combustion traits. And once the riding experience shifts, the global landscape follows. And when riding itself begins to transform, the broader world must evaluate what comes next. Worldwide industry disruption. Honda's EV outlier created a disturbance that spread well beyond its debut stage. Across Asia, manufacturers recognized the concept as a signal that electric motorcycles were entering a new phase. Companies in Japan, China, and India began examining how unconventional designs might allow them to leapfrog traditional competitors. The Asian market, already aggressive in the electric scooter and commuter segments, started adapting strategies to include larger and more expressive electric models. The outlier encouraged regional firms to view electric motorcycles not merely as replacements for combustion platforms, but as canvases where new forms could emerge without legacy constraints. In Europe, the reaction took a different shape. innovation pressure increased because European brands emphasize engineering prestige and design identity. Manufacturers in Germany, Italy, and Austria studied the Outlier's message carefully. They recognized that if Honda could reframe expectations for electric motorcycles, European brands would need to respond with their own vision statements. The Outlier thus acted as a catalyst, encouraging them to push boundaries in aerodynamics, packaging, and long-term electric planning. Globally, this radical concept reshaped electric motorcycle plans. Companies began aligning development cycles around the idea that bold, unconventional designs could define future markets. The Outlier influenced trade talks, investor forecasts, and long-term planning. It proved electrification will include major leaps, not steady steps. And once industries react, political frameworks evolve around them. Policy, regulation, and EV acceleration. Regulation is playing a major role in the evolution of motorcycles, and the Outlier arrived during a period when many governments were intensifying their efforts. Noise restrictions have been tightening across several regions, encouraging quieter transportation solutions. Electric motorcycles benefit naturally from these policies, and the Outlier's unconventional form allowed policymakers to highlight how future bikes might comply without sacrificing performance or identity. Emissions targets continue to drive the shift toward electrification. Countries in Europe and parts of Asia have set phased goals for reducing transportation emissions, and regulatory timelines often extend into the late 2030s. Concepts like the Outlier help governments illustrate what zero-emission motorcycles may look like as those deadlines approach. These regulations also influence the manufacturing priorities of major brands, because compliance becomes a competitive necessity. Incentive programs speed adoption. Subsidies, tax credits, and urban access perks create strong support for electric motorcycles. The Outlier gave policymakers a clear example of future platforms worth investing in. As transportation rules evolve, governments increasingly treat electric bikes as key to cleaner mobility. And regulation does not just change bikes, it changes workers. And when regulation tightens, the workforce must adapt to survive. Labor and supply chain consequences. Electrification does more than alter products. It transforms the roles of the people who build them. The shift toward electric motorcycles reduces the demand for traditional mechanical labor because electric drivetrains have fewer moving parts and simpler service requirements. Jobs centered on machining, lubrication, and mechanical inspection decrease as electric platforms replace combustion models. Workers who specialized in engine assembly face the challenge of retraining or transitioning to new fields. At the same time, the rise of electric motorcycles creates new roles focused on electronics, software integration, and battery diagnostics. The workforce evolves toward digital expertise, reflecting the changing nature of the machines themselves. Manufacturers invest in training programs to help employees adapt, but the transition remains complex. The skill sets that defined the motorcycle workforce for decades no longer match the needs of electric production lines. Supply chains are shifting fast. Parts like carburetors, exhausts, camshafts, and gear assemblies shrink in demand, while battery modules, control units, and sensors rise. Manufacturers now face new suppliers, new contracts, and new logistics. Even as a concept, the Outlier shows how electrification reshapes everything. And when the dust settles, the meaning of motorcycling itself changes. And as industry and labor evolve, culture must answer new questions. The 10-year cultural forecast. The Outlier stands as more than a design experiment. It represents a directional shift in how motorcycling may express itself over the next decade. Cultural meaning evolves as riders reconsider what defines a motorcycle when traditional silhouettes no longer dominate the landscape. The next 10 years may see a divide between those who preserve combustion-era values and those who embrace electric forms that prioritize efficiency, balance, and new types of expression. Shifting expectations are reshaping how riders connect with motorcycles. electric platforms invite newcomers, while longtime riders weigh how these machines fit into motorcycling's heritage. The outlier stands between those worlds, challenging assumptions about identity and performance. It signals a decade defined not only by technology, but by cultural transformation. When a motorcycle abandons the rules that shaped its past, it forces riders to reconsider what the future should look like. 1. Bold Machine can push an entire culture to rethink what motorcycling can become. This is one of those motorcycles that splits opinion. And that's exactly why it matters. Some riders will see progress, others will see problems. Both sides deserve to be heard. Let me know in the comments where you land and what you're riding these days. If you appreciate breakdowns that respect experience instead of chasing clicks, hit like, subscribe, and keep riding with us.